Hello everyone, and welcome to the Henchman's Memoirs. This is our 5e Dark Souls of Drakkenheim campaign recap. And if you remember when we last left off, the party was off books from the main published adventure, and they were here in the sewers underneath the haunted city with Petra Lang and Rolf. Both of them are urban rangers from the Hooded Lanterns, and the party had found the hidden temple of Orcus, and they had defeated the acolytes from the temple and even defeated the high priest. And Elmira here, the vampire seductress, had yet again escaped from the party and turned into smoke and had disappeared. And the party had rescued 5 women which had been sort of chained to the altar, and their blood was being magically sucked out of their bodies to help the cultists summon this lieutenant of Orcus. And between sessions, the party had been talking over the chat, and I'm like, you guys aren't really going to go and try to find Elmira's coffin and put a stake through her pretty little heart. I mean, surely you guys couldn't be so brutal and vengeful. And at least one player had been like, yeah, I want to hunt her down and put an end to her. So apparently that was not agreed to by the whole party, but that's not what sunk into my mind. So my prep, I had her whole lair prepped, everything that we're going to have to go through to get to her coffin and put an end to her. I had a bunch of additional encounters that had to do with the rest of the hidden temple of Orcus. But as soon as the party freed these 5 ladies and got Thaddeus's rug pulled down and rolled up, they were ready to head back to the surface and get completely out of here. Pietro was down to no key points left, and he only had a couple of hit points, and everybody else had used up a lot of their resources, and they just wanted to get completely out of Dodge. So I threw away 4 or 5 pages of prep and went on to the escort mission part of the adventure. So I had decided that the 5 women that they had rescued were actually each representatives of a different one of the factions that are part of the campaign. Not that there was any special significance to that. I just thought it would be the easiest way to kind of keep the factions in the story. And so for each one, there's a Knight of the Silver Order, there's a member of the Amethyst Academy, there's this poor girl, Mara, who's actually a disciple of the Fallen Fire. There was Alicia here. No, I'm sorry. This is let me see. This is Rose, who was a member of the Queen's Men. No, this was the Hooded Lantern girl, because this was the girl from the Queen's Men. This Minnie has a hood, as you can see, so she's obviously one of the Hooded Lanterns. And then this girl looked more like a thief to me, and so she's with the Queen's Men. So what I did was I cut out from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, there are these stat blocks for what they call survivors. And they're basically low-level extra characters who can get killed off in a horror movie kind of fashion as people are dropping left and right, and only the final girl ends up surviving. So I had gotten 4 stat blocks to represent the 4 of them. I did not have one for Mara, because she's a member of the Fallen Fire, and so she was just playing the whole damsel in distress thing and just constantly, hiding behind one of the big strong men in the party. But I thought by telling them the names of these characters and by giving them the stat blocks and letting them roll attacks and stuff for the characters, that they would kind of get more attached to these NPCs, and that would be a way to really make this whole escort quest thing more interesting and memorable. But it didn't really work. The players didn't even want to write down the names that I gave them to go with the stat blocks. They just kept referring to them as acolytes and apprentice. So that didn't really take off. But as you can see here, for you DMs out there, I don't know how you do it. For each one, I mentioned I made a note of which faction they're with, and then I gave them a personality. Like Rose over here is with the Queen's Men, and she's dark and brooding and cynical. And then I have a note that, for me, helps me remember what voice I'm going to do for them. So, of course, Rose Carver talked like this. She's basically Logan, except a little bit higher. And Mara, the Fallen Fire girl, well, she talks just like Dolly Parton. I don't know what's difficult about that to understand. And, of course, I can usually do a reasonably good Judi Dench when I want to, 007. So for each one of them, I sort of had a voice that I wanted to do, and just a short couple words about their personality and so forth. So the party, although they didn't really get attached to these NPCs, they did buy into the idea that, this is an escort quest, and basically their job is to try to, with the few hit points and abilities they have left, get all of these women out of the sewers alive. So looking at this, you can begin to get a hint of the level of chaos that was going on here when you have 2 hooded lanterns, now basically a 3rd hooded lantern, plus 4 other people you're escorting, plus the party themselves. And they're all trying to march this menagerie out of the sewers and back to the ladder that brought them into the sewers. So my encounter idea for this section, an oldie but a goodie, I decided that there was going to be a gelatinous cube in the sewers, because they can't get out of the sewers without facing a gelatinous cube. Although, on further reflection, they did fight slimes down here last time, so it was a little bit repetitive, but I thought it would make for a fun encounter with all of these NPCs that can't afford to get hit by this thing, let alone engulfed by this thing. So they didn't see a gelatinous cube coming. That's not what you do as the DM. I described this this sort of rag doll, this beat up rag doll that looked like it had been a baby doll, or almost kind of now all deteriorated and stuff, kind of looked like a fetus, just floating towards them in the sewers. And they just decided, you know what? We're just going to try to walk on past. It's floating towards us slowly, and maybe, if we don't bother it, it won't bother us. So part of the party made it around the corner. I don't remember the exact marching order, needless to say. And Nexel was in the process of getting around the corner when this thing reached the intersection and reached out a pseudopod and tried to slap him. So then we rolled initiative, and the whole thing was happening. And they didn't have too much trouble with it. Pietor, again, with 2 hit points and no key points, basically ran past it and was trying to get down here where he could keep some distance from it. And he was controlling the Knight of the Silver Order girl. And he wanted her to retreat as well, and maybe, throw a couple sacred flames that way. But I was like, nah, she's a paladin. She's not going to do that. She's going to run up here. So he felt a little frustrated with me overruling him. But basically everybody's trying to hurry up and get around this thing somehow and throw a couple attacks at it, except for this girl who's just hanging out with this urban ranger and sort of hoping for the best. But what I had to go with this encounter is I have all of these little baby gelatinous cubes. See how cute they are? I have all these baby gelatinous cube minis. And so whenever somebody did a slashing attack, or old Atticus here was doing like shatter and thunder attacks, and I was like, oh, definitely little babies are going to pop off. And they only have a couple of hit points, but they give me a chance to turn the action economy in my favor. They can take random swipes at some of these low-level people they're trying to escort and sort of complicate the situation. So the party figured out they didn't like spawning all these babies, but they don't have a lot of flexibility as far as the different kinds of damage they can do. So Belenia, or whatever the Silver Order girl, she briefly got engulfed and was knocked down to 0 hit points, and she was suffocating and drowning in there. And for a moment, Pietor's character was like, shouldn't have gone up there. I mean, but they kind of came back from the, from the edge there and decided, no, we got to try to rescue everybody if we can. And so eventually they dropped this thing. Somebody ran over and made a heal check on her to get her on her feet. They cleaned up the babies, and then they made their way out of the sewers and into the city. So the first order of business, as soon as they got out of the sewers, was trying to decide where they were going to go. Because, of course, they've rescued all these women, and they each represent a different faction around the city. So the Hooded Lantern girl was with the other two Hooded Lanterns, wanted to go back to the garrison. And the Silver Order lady was also on board with this. But, of course, the girl who's from the Followers of the Fallen Fire didn't want to do that at all. She wanted to try to go meet up with her group. I think the Amethyst Academy girl was probably fine with headed to the garrison, but the woman from the Queen's Men definitely wanted to head the other direction, and the player that was controlling her is actually Thaddeus's player, and she had originally tried to be like, hey, look, if you can get me back to Buckle Down Row, I can make it worth your while. And obviously that was never going to happen. But I was trying to introduce a little bit of tension into the scene. But during the fight with the gelatinous cube, Thaddeus had taken on a bear form, and so when they got up to the surface and she's trying to, he just looks at her with his bare face and is like, oh, what are you trying to say? So for the moment, she was tagging along with the group. They didn't roll any random encounters, but I did have a planned encounter as they were trying to get back to the garrison. They reached this intersection, and this door pops open, and a bunch of hollow knights come walking out. These are, again, from the Dark Souls 5e role-playing game. And they're led by this Pontiff Knight, which are these pretty tough, oversized knight guys that you fight several times in Dark Souls. And so, this is my chance to get some mileage out of the Dark Souls elements of the story. And the only person that sensed them, before they just opened this door and came out into the square, actually was the bear. He had advantage. He kind of smelled trouble. And then the next thing we're rolling for initiative. So the bad guys landed pretty high in initiative, and I think just a couple people had kind of gotten out here to sort of square up with them, and they came pouring out. So Pietor, we had been gently ribbing him about kind of staying away from the gelatinous cube. He has only 2 hit points and no key points left. So maybe slightly nettled by our giving him a hard time, he decided he was just going to run up there and take the Pontiff Knight on, like, toe to toe. Right. So these things come wandering out, and the urban rangers are trying to get into position to, like, hit him with crossbow bolts and so forth. And some of the frontline fighters come up. Atticus, of course, gets up here and is going to get into a close toe-to-toe fight. But Pietor, out of his perverse sense of priorities, is like, no, I've got this one. You guys stay back. I'm gonna solo this this oversized haunted set of armor. So Nexel, maybe had 1 silvery barbs left and was over here throwing cantrips. The fallen fire girl was snuggling up to him, being like, protect me, big strong man, and that whole routine. And the Queen's Men rescuee decided to just go ahead and slip off out of sight, because she didn't want to end up at the garrison. So this little drama was playing out. This guy gets 2 attacks per round, and he does a hefty amount of damage. But old Dirtnap Pete, I managed to roll some good roll, or lucky for him rolls, where the knight just couldn't seem to connect with him. So a couple rounds go by. They're managing to clean up some of these guys who basically just have like the stats of skeletons, I think. But they do have this keeps on crawling feature, which is where if you knock them down to 0 hit points, they get a save, a constitution save or whatever against the damage that they took, or they're just dropped to 1 hit point. So that can be pretty frustrating. And the party was definitely experiencing the frustration of that, of these things just keep popping back up and popping back up as the party's trying to fight him. So they got the Pontiff Knight. I rolled 2 attacks against Pietor. They were both hits. I think one of them, no, this wasn't when I got my crit. So the first one put him down, and the second one was like hitting him when he was down. Because in addition to everything else, he thought this would be a good time to mock the Pontiff Knight and try to, like, you know, see if he could get it really, really mad. And, you know, they don't speak. But after he said something particularly rude, this voice echoed from the helmet, like, blasphemer, you know, and it was all in trying to put him out of his misery. So it hit him, and then the second hit counted as 2 failed death saving throws as he was down. So at one point, Thaddeus decided he needed to turn back into his gnomish self so he could, like, hit him with a healing word. He pops back up, and I feel like he went down once or twice, maybe 3 times during this fight. And I said, look, guys, it sounds to me like he's got a DNR. He doesn't want to be saved. Just let him perish. You know, he's trying to solo this thing. But at some point, whichever PC was controlling Rolf decided, you know, Rolf wanted to drop his crossbow and get in there. Rolf has the stats of a veteran, and the way they're written up in the monster manual, like, they get 2 longsword attacks and a short sword attack as a bonus action. They can make 3 attacks per round if they're in melee. So the player who was controlling him decided he wanted to get up in here, and I think he took down one of these guys first. And then he gets up into this melee, and he was rolling aces for Rolf. This was Rolf's big, you know, coming out of the shadows and becoming a major character. He was like, "Witness me!" and he's, you know, hammering on this thing with his swords. And Pietor got knocked down again, and he was going to be. I critted on him. And so Nexel used his last silvery barbs to save him from that fate. He was still down, but at least he wasn't, you know, with all out of death saving throws or whatever. You know, the thing is, sometimes when a character gets suicidal, it just puts greater strain on the rest of the party who's trying to bring him back and get him back to life. So anyway, they managed to finish off the rest of these hollows, and Pietor gets up. He doesn't have any key points, so now he's just swinging fists at this thing. He does a kip up and tries to, you know, kick him and stuff. And I'm pretty sure old Rolf here got the last attack on this thing. So now they're making their way off to the city garrison, where I assume they will drop off most of these ladies that they rescued, and then we'll see where they go from there. Join us next week to find out what happens.